let's go into the panel debate, and let me introduce you to our panelists. That's Katja Kichenko from the city of Antwerp, Karen Siemens from Rebel Group, and Julian Scriven from Brompton. I will just launch our key question. How can we make the collaboration between suppliers and local authorities work? And let me start maybe not with the city point of view, but with the supplier point of view, maybe, and ask Karen our first question. Karen, can you shed a light on maybe the barriers that you have encountered working with local authorities?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Maybe I'll first present myself a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm Karen Siemens. I'm an advisor at Rebel, as Jan already told you. We are a financial economics consultancy firm, and we work on projects in different industries all around the world, but always at the interface between the public and the private sector. My work is mainly focused on projects within the ports and logistics industry. And more specifically, I find the subject of urban logistics very fascinating, but also very challenging, which is the reason why I work often for local authorities in Belgium on this topic. And my field of expertise lies on guiding these cities in setting up instruments to inject innovation, but also sustainability and efficiency in the logistics fabric of a city, and making participation with the private logistics sector possible. To answer your question, Jan, there are indeed some barriers that make collaboration between the public and the private sector more difficult. In my experience during working with local authorities, I noticed that especially in the field of city logistics or urban logistics, the role of a local authority is not always clear, which makes it also very difficult to create innovation processes. Because if you innovate on a local level, this also has an impact on regional or on even national level. So the main question here remains that who takes which responsibility? Is it the national government that should set some guidelines, or is it really at a local level? And this sometimes makes it difficult to already engage with the private sector in order to create innovation in the logistics sector. Furthermore, also, of course, innovation and the market dynamics, they evolve rather rapidly. But policy making is something that goes more slow, because there needs to be a good consideration of what you put into policies. So this different pace also makes it sometimes difficult to collaborate with the private sector. And then also sometimes I noticed already that local authorities are sometimes afraid to engage with the private sector, because they are afraid to do it in the wrong way. They have to stay very neutral, very open, very transparent. But I can tell you that there are more than enough formal frameworks to conduct this participation with the private sector already. So I should say that you don't have to be afraid, and just start participating with the private sector.
Thanks for those encouraging last words, Karen. I want to give the floor already to Katja from Antwerp, because I think Karen already indicated some of those barriers, which might be particularly interesting also for a city as Antwerp. For example, I was struck by Karen's statement on that it could be a barrier or a problem or a challenge to really determine who takes responsibility for this innovation on a national or local level. The city of Antwerp being one of these, well, in Belgium at least, one of the cities that have, of course, a regional dimension to it, and even a national dimension. How can you relate to that, Katja?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Karen, for pointing that out, because we think that's indeed one of the barriers when working together with private suppliers. What is the role that you take in that as a city, as a government, as a region? Because as Karen pointed out correctly, the mobility sector is evolving very quickly. There are a lot of innovations, a lot of suppliers, a lot of different needs indeed. As a city, you sometimes have more specific needs than a region. The mobility suppliers, on their hand, have their needs and their objectives, which is good, of course, because that means that the sector is evolving and is developing. But how do you deal with that as a government, as a local government, as a regional government? So that really could be a challenge to how to make sure to keep up in the first place, but also to support this development, but also make sure, on the other hand, that what the suppliers or the providers do, that it is in line with the mobility policy. So that is really why we believe in Antwerp, and that is also how we are structuring, let's say, our cooperation with the suppliers, is to take the role of the facilitator as a government, in the first place as a city government, because of course we focus on specific solutions that are needed in our city. So that's why we have set up a framework for public-private cooperation called the Marketplace for Mobility, where we really work closely together with private mobility providers on innovative solutions and support them in rolling out their solutions in our city. So that is something that we do now at city level. But of course, indeed, with the coming up of the transport region, we will be looking, and we are already looking, how to expand that even beyond the city, because of course the main goal is to keep not only the city but the entire region accessible and livable, because definitely in Antwerp we see a lot of movement also from outside the city. I think that's the case for every city and every region. And there we really try to set up partnerships with mobility providers, create a network, bring all the parties around to the table and stimulate dialogue to really have a mutual understanding with them, to work together on the same goals, to encourage the development of their innovation, but also contribute constructively to them to make sure that it is in line with the mobility policy. And as a city, we have already established this network, and we will definitely use it, or we are already using it, to broaden the focus outside of the city to the region as well. So we really have a strong basis created for that, for this mutual cooperation, let's say.
Thanks a lot, Katja, for these insights. And I just got a message that Julian from Brompton has arrived in the call. Julian, if you're up for it, and I don't want to barge in on you, but if you're up for it, you may already shed your light also on the first question of today, basically, is the barriers that we could encounter as suppliers or as local authorities when we are trying to collaborate with each other. Julian, is that okay for you to start already?
I've never been known not to take an opportunity to speak when it's given to me.
No
hi, I'm Julian from Brompton. And in terms of what the key barriers that we face when we're dealing with local authorities, there's probably two, and we see this perhaps quite sharply at the moment in the UK, where, shall we say, there's a lot of polarization going on, and I think in other markets as well. And that is where local authorities become concerned, or actually even reticent to move forward with projects because of a noisy minority. We saw a very good example in the UK last year, where local authorities were trying to be putting in sustainable infrastructure, and a relatively small group of people purporting to represent the electorate in that area were able to get very, very sensible decisions reversed. And we see it all the time when we're working, where a project which is very, very good, where there's a good private-public partnership, is often held back because of this concern, this fear, if you like. I think the other thing that we see and we face is quite a large inconsistency, local authority to local authority, never mind government authority to government authority, in terms of how a similar product might be procured how a similar partnership might be put together. And this can make life very difficult, especially when you're trying to innovate, because you're trying to innovate in 6 directions at the same time. And then you almost have to re-innovate every time you go to a new local authority to deliver a product. And I think, again, we can see this quite sharply now with the e-scooters, where they are desperately trying to conform. Well, the good guys are. The good guys are trying to conform and trying to come up with a product that's really going to work. But, you know, the understanding of what good looks like and what complies and what conforms can be very different. So I think those are the 2 challenges. One is, if you like, a political fear to make the strong decisions. And I think the other one is a lack of consistency, authority to authority.
Thanks a lot for the insightful addition to the discussion, Julian. I want to move over a little bit to success stories, because we've talked a little bit about barriers now. If I heard correctly, understood correctly from the story so far, that public-private partnerships and strong political will to make innovation happen are maybe both success stories. Is there anything that you can add to that, maybe from your side, Karen?
Yes, so we noticed that lately more and more the project calls are being used to conduct those innovation processes. And this is a very interesting way of doing so, because you put the leading role at with the private party, so they take the lead in the project, but the city always follows up very carefully the results of the projects. And in this way, you can really learn together and cooperate on a structural basis, which makes it the learning process good for both the local authority and the market players as well. Because as Julian also said, it's not always easy for an innovator to go to every city in a separate way. But in this way, you can really get to know the different aspects of a city, because also not every city is the same, and not every innovation is applicable in every city in the same way. So by doing these projects together, but really taking the lead as a private party, really does bear fruit. And also this knowledge sharing is very big advantage, because also in this way you can, as a city, anticipate on the challenges that your city faces, but always in regard with the organization of the logistics service providers, for example, in my case, in my field of expertise, with always the organization of the private sector in regards. So that's really a good way to do so and to inject this innovation into a city. And this is also something that the city of Antwerp does regularly with their project calls within the marketplace for mobility. So I think that really is a big success story, yes.
Okay, that's a clear, a clear indication for you, Katja, to maybe elaborate a little bit, because of course, we're a little bit stressed for time always, but elaborate a little bit more on this marketplace and what makes this marketplace so successful, as Karen said.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Well, as Karen already mentioned, we have these project calls. Well, actually, within the marketplace for mobility, we have different ways of collaborating with suppliers, but one of them is indeed through project calls. It's pretty straightforward. We launch a project call where we look for mobility solutions that contribute to the reduction of congestion in the broad sense of the word. It could be a general call. It could be also a thematic one, for example, where we look for projects related, let's say, to mobility as a service or urban logistics. We have done both. And then the selected projects receive support from the city. It could be financial support for the rollout of the project, but it could also be communicative support, promotional support, access to our network, and so on. And Karen already mentioned some of the strong points of this project call, but I would like to add to that this is also very result-oriented. So the support that they receive is limited in time, and within this time they have to roll out the project and also evaluate it. So this way we make sure that the means of the city are used very well, so that we have clear results of this project, and it also results in service providers approaching innovation from a new angle. It's not just about let's try something, but it is really about how can risk be minimized by launching or expanding new services appealing to new customer groups, because they really have to get results out of it. And that hopefully, we hope that that also encourages these projects to be not only successful in the short term during this 2 years that the project call is active, but also after that. And we also see that it really has led to structural impact on traffic movement by private cars, vans, and trucks, which is something that we focus on very well. And the total results, I have the numbers here with me, are estimated on 1,150 daily trips avoided for the project's calls so far. So not from the ones that were launched last year. So it really is a nice number that we have, clear results, really specific results that have come out of these project calls during the time of it, of course. And we hope that this also has led to behavior change in the long term. But also next to that, and that's the last point that I would like to say, sorry for elaborating so much in this question, but next to that, we also see that these partnerships really create an input for practical based policies and improved regulation. So it really is an interaction in both ways. So we try to develop or encourage the development of the private solutions, but on the other hand, lessons learned from this cooperation are also taking with us in further policies and regulations that we create further on. So it really shows that working together with private providers in this way has a positive impact on mobility context, not only in the short term, but also in the long term.
Thanks a lot, Katja. Julian, for you, do you have experience also with these kind of project calls or marketplaces? Are other cities also working with that kind of constructions, or?
They are. Although actually, one of the reasons why I was perhaps a little late to this call is actually perhaps a demonstration of what works so well. So we're actually working collaboratively with Transport for Greater Manchester at the moment for an Innovate UK funding bit. And I think where that stems from is the thing I'd like to highlight, which is having an ongoing dialogue between the private sector and the public sector, where you get to understand each other. So we, at Brompton, we have a very deep understanding of the specific transport challenges that Manchester is facing today. And contrawise, Manchester knows what we can, and probably more importantly, what we can't do, but where we've got the strength and depth to work. So that's kind of the first area. And that's come off the back of a project call, but they've already said, based on the knowledge we have from you and from C-Sense and from this, we can see a solution that can deliver actually quite an interesting sector, which is trying to increase modal shift towards active travel in the over 50s, which, having lived in the Netherlands for 10 years, is not a problem in the Netherlands, but I can assure you in the UK is a major challenge. I think the second area, which kind of resonates that, we now work in I can't think of a better word for it than a collective, which is a loose group of transport providers across all different modes: bus, train, bike, scooter, you name it. If it moves, we're kind of part of the same group. And we kind of do road trips, perhaps a bad choice of words. We do tours around the UK, engaging with local authorities with no financial agenda in mind, but more just to kind of educate them on the art of the possible, using mobility as a service solutions, using modal hubs, which are becoming a massive success story in the UK, but contrawise also really listening hard to the challenges they're facing, and kind of trying to build that understanding on both sides of the fence. And I think some of our greatest successes, I mean, we've launched 3 rural hubs in Scotland this year, which everyone thought was bonkers, but it's turning out to be a terrific success because we listened to what they said the challenges were in the Highlands, and they listened to what we could do, and the solutions just then build off the back of that. So I know this sounds really obvious, but it's listening and speaking. It's the secret behind success stories. I find actually the weakest solutions are what I'd call fire and forget requests for tenders, where a local authority in a bubble creates what they think they need, and they don't actually first understand what the art of the possible is out there. And I've seen, and I won't name and shame, but there have been some classic examples in the UK over the last 3 years in shared micromobility, where that has happened, and then they're sat there all confused when either A, they didn't get any response to the tenders, or B, what was launched was absolutely not fit for purpose. So I think there's that engagement, and I don't just mean supplier days, I mean real engagement, really sitting down and talking and understanding.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. On this, just want to add one more point, is or get your ideas on before we go on to the last part of the discussion, is this public-private partnerships and listening to each other and speaking to each other. Is there are some horizontal skill streams also that we are trying to tackle within Fast Track, and citizen participation, citizen engagement is one of them. Do you think citizens also can have a place in these kinds of partnerships? Maybe Katja first.
Yes, I think it could be, because in the end we're all working for the end user. Let's say the best solutions are the ones that are used, of course. So I think it's definitely a strong point or a plus point if you could involve the citizens and really look what are their needs, what are they missing in your city, what is important for them. Also maybe some focus groups on how do they use mobility. I think that's definitely a good point to take into account when developing new solutions. Yes, I agree.
Can you relate to that, Julian, or is it difficult for a supplier to?
It's vital. It's vital, and I think it goes beyond that even. And there's two rather stark case studies in the UK that show how important it is to have that engagement. And one of them is the Glasgow Bike Share Scheme, which is actually branded People Make Glasgow. And I mean, I was fortunate enough to be involved in that scheme, and I know that the people who live in Glasgow see it as their bike share scheme. It's their bike. If there's a problem with the bike, the members of the public will actually do something about it. Now, that again, that's normal in Europe. In the UK, I can assure you that is a very, very unusual thing. And if you counterpoint that with Milton Keynes, where the bike share scheme was parachuted in, and it was then branded up with a financial institution, it was not seen as owned by the people, and they didn't feel that they'd had a ability to influence where the locations were and where they were not. Same with Mobike in Manchester, the doctor scheme that had to close down. And the impact is so different. If there's not enough, if you don't engage, if you don't listen to the people, if you don't shape the solution around them, they don't feel it's theirs, they don't respect it, and it won't work.
Mm-hmm. I understand that as a clear plea for citizen engagement, also in public-private partnerships. Great to hear that. I want to go a little bit to the end of the discussion, and as you know, we will have 28 suppliers pitching their solutions, pitching their ideas to our local affiliates, to our local authorities. Would you have, from the three of you, would you have, let's say in 2 minutes each, 3 or 4 main pointers or tips or tips and tricks that they have to bear in mind when they are listening to the pitches? Maybe start with Karen this time.
Maybe not related to the pitches really, but I do have some best pointers for local authorities in general to get participation going with the private sector. So really go into dialogue with the innovators in the sector and set up a participation framework. I think that's very important also to be that you are comfortable with doing this participation in the right way. But not only think together, also do together with the private sector. So really engage to conduct projects together. And really go and try to achieve a certain goal, because that always works great. And then if you do these projects, it's very important that you can evaluate these projects. So really get in mind, what do you want to learn from these projects? And then collect the data to monitor and to evaluate the results of these projects in order to also anchor these kinds of innovations in the city. So that's, I think, the 3 most important things. Just really engage with the private sector, do projects together to learn together, and know what you want to learn from the projects, and also evaluate and monitor the projects with collecting the data. So.
Thanks a lot. It's very clear. Maybe Katja has something to add to that.
Yes, thank you. Well, it has come up several times during this discussion, I think, but I can't stress it enough that you really have to get to know each other and to listen to each other. Cooperation is only successful when it's a win-win for both parties, both for the local government and for the suppliers. And if you take that in mind, you really establish a long-lasting and valuable cooperation, which is in the end what you want to achieve. Then secondly, I would maybe say that it is also important, and that's something that Karen mentioned already as well, to have a clear objective of what you want to achieve, because then you really can work efficiently towards that goal. And related to that, you will also have, would also need a method, of course, for evaluation. So that you can really see what does work and what does not work, and also adjust and improve your cooperation process accordingly. Because as I said, the field, the sector is always moving, and you really need to keep up with that as well. And maybe to end, something that I also just mentioned and that Julian also focused on, is to really keep the end user in mind. It is for them that we're doing everything. So we really need to look what is needed in your city, make it user-friendly, your solution, and make sure that it is also tailored to what is needed and what the end user is looking for. I think that's maybe overlooked sometimes when thinking about everything like business models and mobility policies, but in the end, it's all about the end user, whoever he or she may be.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks a lot. Julian, I think the last words are for you.
Oh dear.
Any
oh dear,
pointers
that's a very big responsibility. I shall do my best. I think I will start with the same thing that my co-panelist said, which was, it's about engagement and understanding and communication. If you don't start there, you're absolutely doomed for failure. You need to understand what you do. I think the second one, and I speak somewhat with some marks on my back from this, is innovation for innovation's sake is a very dangerous road. So we used to call it the chocolate bicycle syndrome. There's a reason why there isn't a chocolate bicycle. It's because it's not a good thing. But there have been procurement processes in the past where a chocolate bicycle would have won because it was new and sparkly and different. So I would say just be very clear on what you're seeking to achieve before you go down that road, and be very clear what you mean by innovation and what it should be achieving. And I think the third one is, if you feel you're the winner in a procurement process as a local authority, you've actually already lost, because what you've made is you've made the supplier the loser. And I think someone said you make it a win-win, and that's absolutely vital. Again, sorry to say this, I have been through procurement processes where we've walked away. We sat there and said, if we were to win this, it would devastate our business. And it's because someone somewhere in the procurement process has gone, hey, I reckon we can get this for this, and we can turn the screws on this. And there's someone treating it like it's us versus them, and it's not. It's a collaboration, and it should work for all parties. And if it works for all parties, there's so many examples across Europe and the UK where those win-win solutions are in place and are absolutely magnificent. And you can point to the ones where, in the short term, the local authority thought they'd won, and it's been an absolute disaster. We've had a scheme close in the UK within the last 3 months, and I'm not going to mention it. And you could tell from the procurement process 3 years ago it's going to happen. And sorry, maybe a slightly depressing note to finish on, but yeah, let's make sure everyone wins in the procurement process. And as I say, if you're the only winner, then you're actually the loser.
Well, that's a quote to end the discussion with, I think. If you think you're the winner, you're the loser. That's a great one to also put on our website somewhere, I think, with your permission, of course, Julian. No, thanks a lot, all three of you, Katja, Karen, and Julian, to shed your light on this discussion. I think it was very interesting. Also, we touched a lot of subjects that we are tackling in Fast Track in some way or another. So there will be, in the coming 2 years, a lot of attention for citizen participation, for governance, for citizen engagement, of course, for data ownership. So I think we'll be tackling most of these barriers that you have so well pointed out. Thanks a lot for your time. Please stay with us for the next round of discussions if you have the time. And otherwise, thanks a lot for being here.